Michael B. Jordan, Hollywood's golden star, stands before the nation, not on the silver screen, but in a packed courtroom, battling one of the most powerful judges in the country, John Roberts. When Roberts laughs at Michael's opening words, the room freezes. How could a man known for his gravitas mock a celebrity-turned-advocate? But Michael doesn't flinch. Instead, he prepares an argument so raw and powerful, it threatens to shatter the very foundation of the courtroom. What happens when respect clashes with power, and a laugh becomes the spark for justice? Will Michael silence the judge, or will the courtroom's walls swallow him whole? The courtroom buzzed with quiet murmurs as Michael B. Jordan stepped through the heavy oak doors. The air was thick with expectation. Reporters, activists, and everyday citizens packed the benches, eyes fixed on the man who was about to take center stage in what many called the trial of the decade. Michael's calm expression hid the storm inside. This wasn't just another role or movie premiere. It was real. Lives hung in the balance, and so did his own reputation beyond the glitz of Hollywood. The judge's bench loomed ahead, where John Roberts, the Chief Justice, sat with a commanding presence. Known for his strict rulings and unyielding demeanor, Roberts was the kind of man who rarely showed emotion, let alone amusement. So when Michael opened his mouth to deliver his first words in court, a single, sharp laugh escaped the judge's lips. It echoed through the room like a sudden thunderclap. Whispers surged. Was the Chief Justice mocking Michael? Was this a joke? The tension snapped tighter. The room felt colder, heavier. Michael's jaw tightened, but his voice did not waver. He wasn't just an actor here. He was a fighter armed with facts, passion, and a story to tell. Every eye was on him now, not just the audience in the gallery, but the judge himself. Roberts leaned forward, his gaze sharp as a blade, daring Michael to stumble. The courtroom, silent moments ago, held its breath. Michael's opening argument was simple but bold. He challenged decades of ignored injustice and called for accountability. It was a gamble. The judge's laughter was no mere nervous tick, it was a warning, a power move to throw Michael off balance. But the man in front of Roberts was no stranger to pressure or dismissiveness. His past was marked by battles where he had to prove himself time and again. Today, it wasn't about fame or scripts, it was about truth. And Michael was ready to fight. As he spoke, his voice rising steadily, he revealed a glimpse of the human story beneath the legal jargon. This case wasn't abstract, it was about real people crushed by a broken system. The room grew heavier with the weight of his words. Roberts shifted in his seat, the laughter now replaced by a keen, guarded stare. The game had changed. This was more than a legal dispute. It was a clash of wills, of worlds, of belief in justice itself. No one knew what would happen next, but one thing was clear. Michael B. Jordan was not just here to talk, he was here to change everything. The judge's smirk faded, replaced by a flash of something unreadable. Could this young man really shake the pillars of the court? The answer would come soon. But for now, the courtroom held its breath, caught in the eye of a storm that had only just begun. Michael B. Jordan was no stranger to fighting for respect. From the moment he stepped onto the acting scene, many saw him only as a pretty face on screen, not as a man with a voice or a cause. He had battled the stereotype that success in Hollywood meant trading passion for empty fame. But behind the scenes, Michael carried a fire fueled by years of seeing injustice and silence around him. Growing up in a neighborhood where dreams were often crushed by the weight of systemic unfairness, he had seen friends and family suffer from a justice system that too often turned its back. That struggle followed him through every audition, every role, and every public appearance. He learned early that talent alone was not enough. He had to fight harder to be heard. His rise to fame was steeped in hard work, yes, but also in purpose. Michael never forgot where he came from, and as his star grew brighter, so did his commitment to use that spotlight for change. When the chance came to represent a civil rights case that mirrored his own experiences, he didn't hesitate. It was not just about the law, it was personal. This was about standing up for those who felt powerless. Meanwhile, Judge John Roberts' life had followed a very different path. He was the embodiment of tradition and authority, a man who had climbed the ladder of the judicial system with discipline and a strict sense of order. Roberts was known for his sharp mind and cold objectivity, rarely letting emotions cloud his judgment. Yet beneath his composed exterior lay a past shaped by challenges that had hardened his views. Growing up in a small town, Roberts had witnessed the importance of rules and stability. His world was one where the law was king, and questioning the system was dangerous territory. Over the years, his reputation grew as a judge who demanded respect and order, never one to bow to pressure or sentiment. So when Michael entered his courtroom, Roberts saw more than just a man with a famous name. He saw a challenge to everything he believed justice should be. Michael's background as an advocate and actor combined with his passion made him a wild card. Roberts was not used to people who didn't play by the book, who mixed heart with law in ways that unsettled the established order. Yet beneath the surface, both men shared a drive shaped by their own struggles, even if their worlds seemed miles apart. The case before them was no accident. It was a collision of pasts, values, and hopes. Michael's determination was rooted in memories of friends wrongfully accused, of families broken by a justice system that had failed them. He had grown tired of watching good people suffer in silence. This fight was about more than winning in court. It was about proving that the voice of the people mattered. Roberts, for his part, felt the weight of the judiciary's legacy on his shoulders. He believed in the law's power to protect, but also feared what bending the rules might mean for order and society. His laughter in the courtroom was not just mockery, it was a shield, a way to dismiss what he saw as an emotional outburst that threatened the court's dignity. As the trial unfolded, the tension between these two men revealed deeper conflicts, between change and tradition, empathy and logic, personal pain and professional duty. Michael's fight was not just legal, it was a battle for respect, for recognition, and for justice to mean something real. Roberts, meanwhile, wrestled with the challenge of maintaining authority while confronting a truth that unsettled his carefully built world. The courtroom became their battleground, where history, identity, and ideals clashed in ways no one could predict. Both men were fighting their own wars, one for a new future, the other for the preservation of the past. And in the middle stood a case that was far bigger than either of them. The story of Michael B. Jordan's journey from a young man with a dream to a fierce advocate was a testament to resilience and courage. His fight beyond the spotlight was about shining light on darkness that many preferred to ignore. The judge's skepticism and laughter only fueled his resolve. This was a moment where a single argument could change everything, and neither man would back down easily. The moment Michael B. Jordan began his opening argument, the courtroom was electric with anticipation. All eyes were on him as he carefully laid out the core of his case, one built not only on facts but on the deep human impact behind the law. The room was tense but respectful, until suddenly, Judge John Roberts broke the silence with an unexpected laugh. The sound was sharp, almost cruel, cutting through the charged atmosphere like a knife. It was a laugh that didn't just question Michael's words but questioned his very place in that courtroom. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, shocked by the Chief Justice's public dismissal. Michael's heart raced, but his face stayed calm. Inside, a storm brewed. This was no ordinary trial anymore. Robert's laugh was more than a reaction, it was a challenge. It was as if the judge was saying, "You don't belong here. Your voice is just noise." The room felt colder, heavier with the weight of that moment. Michael knew this was a turning point. He could respond with anger, or he could show the strength that had carried him this far. Every person in the room felt the rising tension, the fragile balance between respect and conflict. Michael's mind raced through the years of training, the moments of doubt, the battles fought both in courtrooms and in life. He thought of the people behind the case, families who had been silenced by a system that refused to listen. Now, standing before the judge, he felt the personal sting of being underestimated, belittled. But this was exactly why he had come, to fight back against dismissals, against laughter that masked injustice. For a brief moment, the courtroom seemed frozen. Then Michael took a slow, steady breath and began to speak again, this time with a fire that surprised even those watching. He didn't just argue the law, he spoke from the heart. He told stories of those crushed by bias and neglect, stories that no amount of legal jargon could explain away. He acknowledged the judge's position but refused to be intimidated. It was a gamble, a delicate line between respect and rebellion. Roberts listened, his face unreadable. The judge had built his career on authority and control, Yet here was a man refusing to back down. The courtroom shifted into a silent battlefield where words were weapons, and the stakes were more than a verdict, they were about dignity and truth. Michael's argument was simple but powerful. He highlighted the human cost behind the case, the faces and names often lost in paperwork and procedure. His voice rose and fell, carrying the weight of years of pain and hope. He challenged the judge to see beyond the robes and titles, to understand the lives at stake. The judge's laughter had sparked more than tension, it had sparked a fire. And Michael was ready to burn through the cold walls of skepticism and tradition. As the session went on, the courtroom's mood changed. The laughter that had once echoed now seemed distant, replaced by a new respect that grew with every word Michael spoke. Yet beneath that respect, the judge's eyes betrayed a growing unease. Was he beginning to question what he thought he knew? The inciting incident had done more than shake the courtroom, it had cracked open the foundation of an old system. Michael's challenge was no longer just about a single case, it was about challenging a legacy. And both men knew that the fight was only beginning. The question hanging in the air was clear. Could a single man's truth force change in a place built on tradition? Or would that truth be crushed under the weight of laughter and silence? The courtroom waited, breath held, for the answer. The courtroom felt like a pressure cooker as the trial moved deeper into the battle of wills between Michael B. Jordan and Judge John Roberts. Every exchange, every word spoken, carried weight beyond the law books. Michael faced a crossroads. Should he play it safe, sticking to legal facts and technicalities, or should he risk everything by confronting the deeper truths that the system tried to ignore? The judge's cold stare and occasional smirks were constant reminders that respect was not freely given here. Michael's heart pounded with the weight of the moment. This wasn't just about winning the case, it was about demanding respect, about forcing the court to see the human faces behind the dry pages of legal documents. With each question from Roberts, Michael felt the room tighten, as if the very air was thickening with tension. The judge questioned his methods, his tone, even his background, trying to break him down piece by piece. But Michael held his ground, refusing to be diminished or silenced. He knew that in this courtroom, emotion was seen as weakness, and passion was dangerous. Yet, he also knew that silence in the face of injustice was betrayal. His mind raced through memories of those who had suffered, people who had no voice, no chance to be heard. This was his moment to speak for them. The moral crossroads weighed heavily on him. Should he follow the expected path, hoping for a fair trial within a flawed system? Or should he challenge the rules, risk the court's anger, and speak truths that many wanted to bury? The choice was terrifying. Yet, Michael's spirit burned with a fierce resolve. He decided that respect had to be earned through courage. Instead of hiding behind legal jargon, he began to weave stories of real lives affected by the case. His voice softened and grew stronger at the same time, painting pictures of pain, hope, and resilience. The courtroom audience shifted, leaning in, caught by the raw honesty in his words. Judge Roberts remained stoic, but the flicker in his eyes told a different story. The judge was listening, not just to the facts, but to the challenge Michael posed to the court's authority. Michael's bold approach unsettled more than just the judge. The lawyers, the reporters, and even the jury could sense the breaking of old barriers. It was no longer a simple legal proceeding, it was a battle over the meaning of justice itself. With every passionate sentence, Michael risked crossing a line. He challenged the court to recognize the failures that had been ignored for too long. He dared to question the fairness of traditions that kept power in the hands of few, leaving many unheard. The tension in the room built to a nearly unbearable level. The judge's questioning grew sharper, his tone colder. He demanded facts and logic, but Michael responded with a mix of both facts and humanity. It was a delicate dance, a fight to hold the court's attention without losing his footing. At times, Michael's resolve wavered under the weight of the judge's power. But each time, he found strength in the faces of those he represented, their suffering and hope fueling his words. The courtroom was no longer just a place of law. It was a stage where courage met resistance, where truth faced tradition. The moral crossroads were clear. Michael could remain silent and accept a small victory, or he could risk everything to expose the deeper truths that the court feared. His choice was bold and clear. He would speak not just as a lawyer or celebrity, but as a voice for justice. This decision changed the atmosphere completely. The courtroom grew quieter, heavier, as everyone waited to see how the judge would respond to such a challenge. Robert's usual composure showed cracks, a sign that Michael's fight was making an impact. But the battle was far from over. The rising tension was a storm gathering strength, a test of wills and values that could change the course of the trial, and perhaps even the court itself. Michael's moral stand was a beacon for many watching, but it also placed him at great risk. The question loomed: would the court respect this new approach, or would it crush the voice that dared to speak so boldly? Just when the courtroom seemed to settle into a rhythm of tension and challenge, Michael B. Jordan shifted the ground beneath everyone's feet. What had begun as a battle over legal facts transformed into a revelation that no one saw coming. Michael stepped forward with evidence that was more than just paperwork or testimony. It was a mirror held up to the court, reflecting hidden truths and uncomfortable realities. The judge, John Roberts, who had maintained a steely, unreadable expression, was caught off guard. The evidence Michael presented exposed biases deeply embedded in the system, ones that even the court had failed to acknowledge. It wasn't just about this case anymore. It was about a pattern of injustice stretching back decades. The courtroom grew silent, the weight of Michael's words settling over everyone like a heavy fog. Witnesses were no longer just names. They became symbols of a broken system. The twist wasn't just in the facts, it was in how those facts were framed. Michael connected dots that the court had deliberately left blurred. He spoke of people forgotten, voices erased, and rules applied unevenly. His argument forced the judge and the entire courtroom to question long-held beliefs about fairness and power. Robert's sharp eyes flickered with a mixture of surprise and discomfort. He realized that Michael's fight was more than a legal challenge, it was a challenge to the very foundation of the judiciary. The courtroom, once a place of order, now felt like the edge of a storm. Michael's evidence was compelling, raw, and impossible to ignore. It revealed how systemic flaws had led to the suffering of countless individuals. The judge's laughter from earlier now seemed like a distant memory, replaced by a quiet tension that spoke volumes. The twist shook not only the court but everyone watching the trial. Reporters scribbled furiously, capturing the moment when the narrative shifted. Michael's argument was no longer about winning a case, it was about forcing the system to face its own failings. Roberts found himself in an unfamiliar position. He was forced to listen, to reconsider, to confront the possibility that the system he had defended might be flawed. The courtroom became a battleground of ideas, where justice was no longer a simple answer but a complex question. Michael's revelation raised uncomfortable truths that challenged not just the judge but the entire legal establishment. It was a moment that could redefine justice or reinforce the walls of resistance. The tension was palpable as Roberts weighed the evidence and the moral weight it carried. For the first time, the judge seemed to hesitate, his usual certainty shaken. The courtroom waited, breathless, as the judge's decision loomed. Michael had done more than argue a case. He had changed the story. The question now was whether the court would accept this new reality or reject it to protect the status quo. The twist left everyone wondering. Could one man's courage really break through decades of silence? Could the truth, finally spoken aloud, bring change? The answer was still unclear. But one thing was certain. Michael B. Jordan had turned the tide. The courtroom was no longer just a place of law. It was a stage where history might be rewritten. Roberts, for all his power and authority, now faced a challenge unlike any before. The revelation was a spark, and the courtroom was the tinderbox. Whether it would lead to fire or ashes remained to be seen. But Michael's argument had shaken the court to its core, forcing everyone to rethink what justice really meant. The verdict was read in a courtroom still heavy with the echoes of Michael B. Jordan's powerful argument. The room held its breath as Judge John Roberts delivered a decision that surprised everyone. It was neither a complete victory nor a total defeat. The ruling acknowledged the flaws Michael had exposed but stopped short of declaring sweeping change. The decision was a cautious step forward, a recognition of the problem, paired with a call for further review. It was clear the court was reluctant to fully embrace the shift Michael had demanded. The courtroom erupted in mixed reactions. Supporters of Michael's fight cheered quietly, while skeptics exchanged wary glances. Michael himself stood tall but thoughtful. This outcome was not the end he had hoped for, But it was a beginning. The victory was bittersweet, marked by the tension between progress and resistance. Judge Roberts' expression remained unreadable as he returned to his seat. His earlier laughter was now a memory, replaced by a silence that spoke of reflection and perhaps regret. The judge's quiet nod to Michael at the end of the session was subtle, but it carried weight, a sign that beneath the stern exterior, the man had been moved. Yet, the real battle was far from over. The ruling left open many questions about justice, power, and change. The court had taken a first step, but the road ahead was uncertain and fraught with challenges. Michael's fight had exposed cracks in the system, but whether those cracks would widen into true reform was unclear. Outside the courtroom, the story spread quickly, igniting debates, inspiring activists, and unsettling institutions. Michael became more than a celebrity or a lawyer. He became a symbol of courage and the power of voice. But he also knew the system was complex, and real change required more than a single case or courtroom victory. The story left many things unsaid. What happened behind the scenes, in quiet chambers and private meetings, remained a mystery. How deep the judge's thoughts ran, and what he truly believed beyond the courtroom facade, was left to speculation. The unresolved tension between tradition and progress lingered in the air. Michael walked out of the courthouse with a mix of pride and determination. The fight had changed him, sharpening his purpose. He knew this was only the start. The legal battle was over for now, but the larger struggle for justice and equality continued. He carried with him the stories of those who had been forgotten, the faces that had inspired his fight. And in the silence that followed the verdict, a new chapter was beginning, a chapter where voices like Michael's could no longer be ignored. The courtroom may have returned to its routines, but the impact of this moment echoed far beyond its walls. Change was slow and uncertain, but the spark had been lit. The question remained, would that spark grow into a flame that could truly transform the system? The answer was still unwritten, resting in the hands of those willing to keep fighting. Michael B. Jordan's journey had moved from spotlight to courtroom and into history. What lay ahead was unknown, but one thing was certain. The laughter that once tried to silence him had instead become the fuel for a fight that refused to end.